So what about applying this quality improvement project or process in the ICU? I'm going to both explain the generic methods, so you can take this home and do it for sedation, delirium, whatever you want, because I'm going to give you the generic methodology or approach, but then I'm going to take that approach and apply it specifically to early rehab in the ICU and show you how to do it for that case. So this is an article we published in the BMJ that explains this structured approach to quality improvement. I'll go through each stage of it, but it starts over here saying whatever problem we're trying to fix, we need to think about within the larger healthcare context. It's not just that the OTs and PTs can't find their way to the ICU, or it's not just that the nurses are saying, go away, don't treat my sick patient. There's clearly a much larger problem that requires the whole healthcare system, and the only way we're going to solve that problem is if we have a multidisciplinary team that represents all of the stakeholders. So that's really what this part of the figure tells us. And then it takes us through a number of different steps. The first step, starting up here, is summarizing the evidence. And we're going to help you. We will have done this for you in the conference. So step number 1 is done. We will have summarized all the relevant evidence for you, so you will go home armed with knowing what you should be doing. So tip. But this next step, understanding the barriers we can't do for you. I don't know what the barriers are in your own setting back home. I can tell you the barriers here, and we will share many common barriers, so you will get a number of tools that you can take home, but that doesn't stop you from needing to go back to your home institution and systematically, with your multidisciplinary team, talking about what are the barriers to doing it here. And how do you do this so-called barrier assessment? Well, you want to think through the entire process of implementing early rehabilitation. What's involved? Well, you need to screen patients because you don't want to be delivering this in some patients that are really, really sick. You need to screen for safety. You need to have appropriate orders for OT and PT. You need to have an appropriate engagement of your nurses because, as Jen said, mobility is not just owned by OT and PT. All of us are responsible for this. You need to think through each and every part of the process and walk through it with your team and figure out at each and every step why something may fall through. And you're going to end up having tens and tens of barriers. It's not just one. You're going to have many things that you need to think about and overcome, because if there's only one problem, we don't have enough therapists, the solution could be easy in some settings, but we could give you therapists and the problem still would be there because there's many other aspects. So the second thing after summarizing the evidence is understanding these barriers. And before you start the project, you also need to have some measurement. You need to understand, how are you going to decide if you've gotten better? It's very nice to speculate, we're 10 times better than we were. But that's not going to be very convincing. And we're all very good at patting ourselves on the back and thinking we're doing a better job than we really are. So you need to get some measures of how you're doing. And you need to get them before you start the project. You need to have some baseline measures, because if you're going to go to administration and say, hey, listen, we've gotten so much better, you need to tell them how bad you were at the beginning. So you need to think about, how can we practically measure some of these things as part of routine care? And we'll talk about how you might do that. So you need to think about some practical measures, and you need to measure your baseline performance. And only once you've done those steps can you actually begin to think about moving forward. Everybody wants to jump into, let's start executing a project. That's not going to work unless you've done the other 3 steps first. And not only do you need to do those other 3 steps first, before you jump in and execute, there's 4 E's. Before you jump into execute, which is E number 3, you need to engage and educate and then execute. So what does engage mean? There's no way that you're going to share information with people and have them absorb it unless you've got their attention and their interest. So we've engaged all of you. You've made the trip here. You've paid the registration fee. You are engaged, but not every one of your colleagues back home is going to be the same. So before you go home and rush to try to share all this information with them for them to change practice, you need to engage them. And we're going to talk about, in the case study part of this, how you might do this. So once you have their attention, then they might be willing to absorb some molecules of knowledge that you're going to share with them. So engage and then educate, and then you begin to execute. And the execution part of a QI project means, what are we specifically going to do to overcome these barriers? What kind of toolkit are we going to create to make implementation happen? And then the fourth E is evaluate. You need to use those process measures to say, hey, are we getting better? Because I can promise you, you're never going to be better the first time out doing this, right? The first week, you're not going to have solved the problem. The first week, you're going to probably have identified a few more barriers that you need to overcome. So you need to constantly be evaluating and repeating the engage, educate, execute, tweaking your intervention to get better.